of Tarabella Distillery, being the host. We have one of the greatest, shall I say, alive masters of rum. He knows everything about it, the different nuanced flavors. And he's being humble, okay? Uh, and here we go. Here is, without further ado, here is Ian, and he's going to take you not just to the across the pond to the United Kingdom, but I guess when it used to be the global reach of the empire, when rum wasn't just about rum, but it was actually what they drank daily on their ships, which I'm sure he can fill you in with that unique name they gave it on the ships and everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, of course, yeah, the daily tot, that's what it would be, from the old flagons, of some of which you can still get today. There are still some flagons around that are ex-army issue from around the 60s, I would say, something like that. So there's not
Ooh.
many left in circulation, but, there are a few companies that bottle them and sell them still.
Oh, wow. So, for those of us that don't know, the British Army used to give every single day, what was the proper word for it? They had some
Ah, it
terminology.
was a ration, so you'd get a ration of rum, and I
Oh,
think
man.
I think they actually ration beer as well. So any kind of alcohol, they would ration it. But obviously they had to kind of knock that idea on the head because people were kind of drunk. Flying off the deck cans and stuff like that. So yeah, people took it to a bit of excess. Doesn't really work for a good productivity, I guess, in the navy or in the army when you're firing guns and stuff. So it kind of makes a lot of sense, really. Not so bad for our kind of somewhat sedentary kind of position that we're in now, where we kind of sit behind desks or walk around warehouses, opening casks and having a look at these types of things. So somewhat different.
Wow. Okay, so that is definitely positioned the United Kingdom in the right place to become what they are, not just Scotch, but the rum capital. Can you tell us a little bit about all of that, the growth of the rum industry, its ups and downs, and where you come in?
Yeah, well, I mean, the rum industry obviously has been going for centuries, and so they used to import into the UK through a few different ports. They used to come into London Gateway, which was one of the biggest, Bristol as well, which was quite well known for it, but also Liverpool as well. Liverpool, which is where I live at the moment, is was one of the busiest ports. A lot of people migrated from London to Liverpool. And yeah, they still bring rum into Liverpool today, and Glasgow as well. I think was another port of entry, and it was just a lot of it. I think was just down to the shipping routes, which is again why Liverpool was quite prominent, because of where it's positioned in the UK. But yeah, I mean Liverpool Docks was probably built on rum really, and they still do it today. So it's still going strong. But yeah, it's I mean the history of rum is quite detailed. It spans many years. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting industry to go into. Not something that I thought I would go into myself. Although it's always kind of like, even just growing up, it was kind of always around like my house when I grew up, because my dad was in the industry for years, and
Oh,
he started off in Seagram's back in the 1970s, which was
wow.
it was a base in Liverpool. In fact, the Seagram's warehouses are still there today. And so he used to work in the labs, and he used to do blend formulations for Captain Morgan's and stuff like that. When it used to be good, and Lamb's Navy and stuff like that. I think Red Heart rum, I think, was another one which was an export to South Africa, and New Zealand, I think, as well. But like Lemon Heart rum, these types of rums he kind of worked with, and so those types of rums were always around the house, and yeah, so that's kind of where I knew about rum. And then he was doing a lot of Scotch and stuff like that, gin, done a lot of gin production for
Wow.
Beefeater and stuff like that, various different projects. Even done RTDs, which is Margarita RTDs. I quite remember them vividly. Stealing them out of his rum cabinet and and drinking them as a teenager. But yeah, so yeah, he's that's kind of where I knew about rum. But like my first kind of career in rum was with the Main Rum Company, which obviously was based in Liverpool, and yeah, like it was an interesting process to sort of get a job there. So like I sent a CV in because I was working for an oil company in a suburb of Liverpool, and I was basically just sort of running the laboratory there, and I'd kind of had enough. I'd worked there for like 5, 7 years, and yeah, I was just looking for something different. And to be honest, I've never really found like my kind of career calling, if you like. And anyway, I sent my CV into the Main Rum Company, and maybe like a year later, I got a call up from the managing director at the time, which was Eric Strawn. Very, very austere man, but also very friendly and very knowledgeable about the industry and the mechanics of the industry as well. And yeah, so like a year later, I got a phone call to say, "Oh, look, do you want to come in for an interview?" So I said, "Great." So got all suited and booted, went down and met the two main guys at Main Rum at the time, which was Ian and Eric. And sat down, had a nice conversation for about an hour or so, and they said, "Okay, thanks very much. See you later." So I was like, "Okay, great." And then so I didn't really get nothing back. A couple of weeks went by. They phoned up and said, "Oh, do you want to come in for a second interview?" And I was like, "Okay, great." So just to put you into the perspective, there was only 3 employees at the Main Rum Company at the time, and I'd met 2 of them, and essentially it was the what we would like to say probably the matriarch of the company, which was her name was Christine Southern, and she was like basically the finance officer there. So she held all the purse strings and that type of stuff. But I had to meet her and had a conversation with her as well before I could be accepted for the role. So it was a little bit, if your face fits, then, great. And if not, then you would be getting a job here. But anyway, it all went well. A couple of weeks later, I got told I could start the job, and so early in 2015, I started working for the Main Rum Company, and that was really where I found my calling for rum, and actually really found my career calling, and it has kind of answered a lot of questions for me throughout my whole life, to be honest. Just because I never thought that I would ever be so passionate about something, and so to find rum, learn all about it, understand it, enjoy it, and watch other people enjoy it, which is probably one of the best things that you could find about rum. And it is a bit of a cliche that you find, within the rum industry, that people will say, "Oh, it's best enjoyed with friends." But it's best enjoyed with clients. It's best enjoyed with friends or family. But the cliche is true for me in a lot of ways. But the thing about rum was the amount of history that goes with it, the amount of culture, the traditional methodology, most importantly, the quality. So the quality of what producers create, as well as the aged qualities of rums. It's just, and the flavor spectrum is just completely expansive. It's just, you can literally create anything you want from a rum, some fermented molasses or cane juice. I mean, it's just insane, using different fermentation techniques, different yeasts, different timings. It's just, it really, really is quite an enthralling spirit to really understand and be involved with.
No, one second, I should have been off. Sorry about that.
Sorry, do you need to take that?
No, it's someone in my distillery calling. I tell them I'm in a meeting. Um, my passion what is creating, but even more learning, and that's why I'm so pleased to run this podcast, because when you get distilling, you just kind of repeat over and over and over, fill off the legal boxes. I mean, that's why I have my software that even helps the industry, but there's no growth. You kind of repeat yourself over, and then I'm getting clusterphobic over here. Maybe start a podcast, speak to other people in the industry, just you grow, and then you can, even if you're not physically experimenting with a new product because you got to fill out paperwork to do it, but mentally, you're like you're speaking about different types of rum now, and I'm thinking, huh. So you just spoke about rum, RHUM, because you said sugarcane or blackstrap molasses. I'm thinking, maybe that time when when I did I did the sugar cane, I did it wrong because you're saying it's so delicious. I must have burnt the sugar or something because I tried to do it. So, it's just so enjoyable, and that's why I love the podcast. Anyways, back to you. The ringer should be off.
So, well, I mean, just going into what I kind of started as, I mean, I really just started from the ground up, So, I literally went into the main rum company. One of my first tasks working there was to label all of the casks. So a lot of the casks in the warehouse, I think at the time there was probably maybe 6 or 7 thousand, maybe a bit more casks. Now most of them had labels on, but there was quite a lot that didn't. So, and they were based in the vaults in Liverpool, and so it was literally underground in Liverpool, vaulted ceilings. It was
Well,
quite cold in there as well. So yeah, I had to go look at the heads of the casks because they'd been written on in permanent marker, note down all of the rotations, the various different marks that they gave them, go back and then find out what they were, understand what they were, what country they were from, what distillate they were, what still type, and then find out how long they'd been matured for and stuff like that. And then I'd create the labels, go back and then stick the labels onto the casks themselves. And that was like 6 months. The first part of my career, 6 months was just noting cask numbers down and noting rotations down, learning all about them, and then understanding what they are. And then, yeah, I kind of just started from that, like literally just labeling casks. But as I went forward, Eric and Ian would teach me how to, import tankers, then do the filling operations. So, basically instruct warehouses or filling houses to use particular casks in a particular order, and to then fill different types of rum into, and then go back and then assess the casks afterwards. But that was kind of ended up being a lot of my job, was a lot of the operational side. So a lot of importing direct from producers, and then the onward operations of filling into cask, and then re-racking operations, consolidations, and then eventually sourcing casks myself, and then over longer periods of time as I got into the stride of sort of my career, and I learned more about the ROMs, I learned more about the producers, I learned more about the cultures behind them, the traditional methodologies, the still types, the maturation process, and then it was really just how do we develop the maturation process? How do we get one lump of one rum and then diversify it and make it slightly different or change it in some way? Develop the liquid in a way that is positive, but then adds another layer of flavour on top of it. So then it was understanding the spirit, the maturation of the spirit, and then looking at different cask types, different pre-seasoned liquids to then layer flavour on top of already matured spirits by using different cask types and different pre-seasoned liquids. So then it was understanding the pre-seasoned liquids. So if you had like a Oloroso sherry or something, then you get the sherry, understand the sherry, understand the flavour, and then you can decide what rums are going to work with that type of cask, and even species of oak as well. So different types of oak. So whether it's like a French oak, or it's American white oak, or acacia or Greek oak, or whichever it may be, just understanding how that species of oak works, and what flavour compounds we're going to gain from maturation process with it.
I mean, each one of these pieces, from my own experience, are a piece of itself. Like, I know myself, you said rum, I aged bourbon in a rum cask. So I had Jamaican rum cask, I had from Guadeloupe, and it came out so different each one.
Yeah.
And like I can only bottle one because that one tasted good. The rest you're like, I should have known that. So you do what you do with that. You put it into another barrel. You sell it off to someone else who's gonna do something with that. But that's when I realized that, and you broke it down so nicely. Besides for the aging, which you apparently doing it in caves underground or something.
Essentially, I mean, it's not too different to distinct distillers where I am now. Like, you know, they've got underground bunkers as well, which the site itself is actually an old World War II site.
Oh, wow.
And during World War II, they decided that they needed aviation gas to be pumped all around the UK and across over to France. And so what they done was, in their wisdom, in the middle of Shropshire, because it's in the Midlands, obviously, they decided to build 22 very large tanks that could hold aviation gas. They built an ethyl house, so they would produce the ethyl house, they'd bring in the aviation gas, mix the ethyl with the aviation gas, and then that would help to reduce the carbon buildup in the combustion engines for the Spitfires and the Mustangs and Hurricanes and whatnot. And so they had an underground series network of pipelines as well, which went distributed all the way across the UK and over the Channel as well. So
Wow.
they could actually pump aviation gas during the war effort all the way around without using tankers. So the Luftwaffe couldn't see it. They couldn't bomb tankers on the road, and they didn't have to do covert operations at night. They could literally just pump it under the ground, and all of the airfields had everything that they needed. So what Distinct have done now is they've cleaned out all of the tanks. They've all been prepped. We cut into the tanks through the underground tunnels, and we've now changed it into a maturation space essentially, which is very, very temperate. It keeps a very cool sort of
Correct.
temperature through the whole year because it's basically 3 foot thick reinforced concrete, then it's steel lined, and then there's about 30 foot of earth on top. There's literally like trees growing out top of it. There's deer on site that run through the site all day. Um, so yeah, it's like you wouldn't even notice. Even the buildings on site, they designed them so that it looked like farmhouses, so that the Luftwaffe couldn't tell, you know, what this was. They just thought it was a farm with just trees growing out everywhere, you know, with a couple of little farmhouses. So yeah, that it's not a very different maturation space to what I'm very much used to already. So it
The
just means that
story is,
you can be very controlled about your maturation. So you know you can nothing happens too quickly, depending on what you're using. You know, there's not all of these massive sort of humidity and temperature fluctuations that you might find in, you know, tin sheds or you know throughout the Caribbean or something like that. You know, it's very very different.
yes, just explain the difference in temperature and how the Caribbean, it's so hot that it evaporates quicker, changes the flavors, because that's very important, and that I believe differentiates what's aged in the United Kingdom so differently than what you get out of the Caribbean. Besides, I mean, you can also just add on another layer once you're at explain the regulation difference, because that's a big one.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the for the Caribbean, I think you're probably looking. Obviously, it'll change from country to country, but you're looking anywhere sort of between 10 and maybe 13, 14% losses per year, which, you know, comparatively for the UK, you may be looking at 3.5%. Um, and so there's a couple of things. Obviously, you know, you lose a lot of the water in the Caribbean, so your alcohol is concentrating essentially as well as extracting. But as obviously that water is evaporating, your solubility rate for breaking down wood sugars and things like that is evaporating also. So essentially, you're just concentrating alcohol, and it's concentrating flavor as well. But because of the peaks and troughs of temperature and humidity, your cask is constantly sort of expanding and contracting as well. Which you know that's good for the product as well. But then I think there's only so much extraction that you can take before it starts to affect the liquid. So I would say my kind of rule of thumb would always be, you know, your distillery character has to be notable. So whether that's little or a lot, it doesn't really matter, and it depends on what you want and what you like also. But I think throughout maturation process, you need to have distillery character that is notable, so that you know what it is, where it's come from, that type of thing. And I think with the UK, with it being, so temperate and much colder, this process takes, maturation, extraction, and the breaking down of the wood sugars and whatnot, and extracting compounds takes a lot longer time. But also it's just nowhere near as aggressive. So you end up with distillates that are more sort of distillery character forward, I would say, rather than oak extractive forward. So there's a balance for everything, I would say, and all rums are made differently too. So depending on the weight of your liquid, like if you've got like a, I don't know, like a Port Morant or something, which is like a double distilled wooden pot still, heritage still from Guyana, that's like total volatiles of 800 or something, which is, that's quite a weighty liquid, in comparison to say maybe like a light Spanish style, which is maybe 100. Total volatiles maybe a bit more. So you can see there's quite a difference there. Those types of liquids, that are quite high in volatile content can actually take a lot more of the wood oak extraction. But again, there's just balances for everything.
Yeah, I mean everything, as like you're saying now, is a lot. It's a live product. Even the wood, it was a live tree, so it develops differently in the forest. The sun, um, the rainy season, all of that has an effect, and that's where you need a real pro to go ahead and say, hey, this oak, this barrel is like this. I see the grains, the toast, the char, and all of that. It's something that a lot of people don't appreciate. They'll go in and they say, I don't understand, why is this bottle $30 and this bottle $300? Um, but I think you're putting it down very well. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
mean, I've done a bit of research into American oak as well, which was, quite interesting. Getting down into sort of like the gritty details of, was it kiln dried or was it, left out in the open to sort of, weather it itself before it gets made into a cask. Which, I do think that these things, although they are fairly nuanced, I think they do have an effect on your overall maturation process and liquid, and actually, the life cycle of your cask too. Which is, this is life cycle of a cask is something I find quite interesting. It's because we use virgin oak at Distinct, but then we've got used bourbons, which are all variant, depending on age and, char levels and things like that. Um, but again, it's all of these things that you have to kind of look at what you want at the end of the process to then reverse engineer how you mature that.
yeah.
And again, it's just kind of using experience, to gauge that experience of liquids, using analysis details to understand your liquids, using really good suppliers that you've used for long periods of time, so the quality of casks that you get and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many variables to maturation, but that's part of the fun.
What's your worst experience with a cask delivery? I love this
Um,
question.
well, there was quite a bad one, and it was from Kentucky as well. I'll be honest.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, they were, you get 210 to a 40-foot high cube, and they'd shipped them over. I mean, they don't strap these things in, right? Which, is fine. But normally at the end of the container, they usually kind of pack it with something. This one wasn't packed. And the guys, at the warehouse, they opened up the 40-foot high cube and literally just tumbling down. There was like, 20 casks just went flying out the back.
Well, yeah.
And there was some bad damages, so they had to get recouped some of them. But that was probably one of the worst ones. But some of the worst ones are, cask deliveries of, rums that you buy from distilleries or whatever. Some of them have been awful. Just really bad, and that's like full casks coming out at you. You know, 250 kilos just flying out the door, like, you know, and then, you know, your cask cracks and it's pissing everywhere, you know, it's like, oh God, no.
No. If someone ever-
Fortunately, not happened very often. That I've only seen that once or twice. But yeah, I mean, when I've had deliveries before in the past, you know, I've had to do cask reports and stuff like that. So literally, you go and check every single cask. You look for leaks. You're looking for the quality of the casks, all of that kind of stuff. And it goes into a report, and you know, you give that to your hierarchy, just to let them know what your findings are. You know.
It's like, that one we're not going back to ever again for supplies.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, sometimes it's just a point of learning as well. And when you talk to suppliers and stuff like that, you say, look, this is how we would pack a container, you know, and illustrations, photos, all of that kind of stuff. And that just really helps, you know, for everybody. Because you need to tell your supplier what you're expecting. As a customer, and if they're not au fait with it, then you know you need to be able to tell them. Of course, the other option would be just to send it in IBC, because that's just really easy, right?
You mentioned that. What's interesting is you mentioned you were able to actually get a Cooper to repair the barrels, and that we don't have over here in the U.S. If you get a faulty barrel where I am, good luck finding a Cooper.
Yeah, I mean that was quite a similar problem for England as well. But you know there are quite a few Coopers around now in England. There was one that we always used in Liverpool called Leslie Skinner, and you know he'd done TV sets and film sets and all sorts of stuff. You know, and he retired about 5 years ago now. But then there was another company over on the east side of England, and you know they were really good. Kingsbarn, I think they're called now. But yeah, they're a full cooperage service. You know, they're like 4th generation, and if you get really stuck, you know, Scotch is only up the road. So there's like Speyside Distillers, you know, Speyside Cooperage or wherever. You know, and they will probably charge you a lot to do it, but they would do it. Or they'd have free Coopered casks that you can take.
Very cool, because like that relationship really doesn't exist here. That you could go over to a big distillery and say, "Look, I just need a hand." I just can imagine the amount of paperwork I would have to fill out.
Yeah.
$10,000 to Cooper your barrel, you know, something like that would wind up being like not a rational number.
Well, that's it. You might as well just get a hoop driver and start yourself. I mean, that's kind of what I do now as well. So,
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, I got a load of barrel tools. If any of our stock starts leaking or anything like that, I always check the bands, all of that kind of stuff, putting in reed paper into the crossings to the top, just to seal
Whoa.
it. You know, if you get a bit of a leak, sometimes it might be quite minimal, but a dollop of wax on there, wait for the sugar to seal it, or you know the wood sugars to seal it, and then that's what I do. Or you stand it up and then leave it, transfer it into another cask. Worst case scenario, but ultimately, really, what you want is to use the same cask all the time throughout your maturation process. But yeah, again, life cycle of a cask. You know, you know, I've worked with casks that are older than me. You know, and I'm 42 now. And they have a use, you know, they do have a use, they have a purpose. As long as they are tight and they're wet, they're good. You know, you can use them for some things, like, you know, if you've got really old spirits, you know, you transfer them into these fairly sort of inert containers, because they're not going to mature, they're just going to oxidize a little bit more. As long as you keep them topped up and keep them filled up and re-racked, then, you know, your spirit can age for a lot longer, particularly in, you know, our type of conditions that we have in the UK. And if you've got something which is underground, like we've got a distinct, then, you know, that continual process is inordinate. You could go on for longer periods of time.
I mean, what you're saying right now is absolutely fascinating. Most people don't realize that a barrel is. We in the U.S. love disposable. Okay, so we created a whiskey full bourbon.
I know. And you know what? The flavour profile of rum and Scotch whiskey is pretty much based on it now, and then like
Yeah.
and this is why using different cask types and different oak species is can be somewhat alien to people because everybody has this note of bourbon throughout their spirit, whether they like to admit it or not. There is that kind of extractive of bourbon in there.
Hey, the Donald over there, you hear that? You already got the world's control through your bourbon. Anyways, you influenced everyone. It's something actually that I always harp on. Harp on might be the wrong word, but when you use a sherry cask, which is generally going to be not well, it could be prior to have been a bourbon cask, but will you see none of those notes? Because people are always talking about rum as being it was the oldest of spirits. It might not be accurate, but it was like the most prevalent drink everywhere. And they wanted this one's the real McCoy, even though McCoy's Scotch. So it's kind of like when someone says, "I'm like, you really don't, you're really mixing things up." But is there a way to get that original profile without having the bourbon notes?
If you use the same species of oak, I guess you would have similar compounds within the oak. So then you would get that. So, I mean, generally you find you get a lot of these kind of toasted coconut and, vanilla, obviously from the vanillin and then various oak tannins that you'd find. So it does come down to species as well. And some are more aggressive than others, so like if you compare like a Quercus alba to a Quercus rubor, the French oak and the white oak, the French oak is really quite tannic
Yes.
and quite aggressive, and so you have to be quite delicate when it comes to like a toasting of those types of casks. Like you can't go well, you can go for a heavy char, but then you're going to have like a real lot of it extractive tannic value very very quickly too as well. So I would always go light on those. But again, it depends on what you want to use it for. If you want to take 6, 12 months in that French oak and then use a bourbon afterwards, I mean that could work out really really well because of the sweetness of the bourbon afterwards, um, and then reuse your French oak again. So if you have that into a process, then you can use your extractive qualities from each cask, just in the right methodology, with the right time frames to affect your liquid in the correct way, or just the way that you want it to.
So what is very interesting, I mean, this might surprise you, but when I went to Cuba, I toured Havana Club. And for those that are not aware, maybe we won't call it Havana Club in the US so I don't get sued. But it's the legitimate Havana Club, unbelievable museum, great experience. And what fascinated me is they're using American oak barrels. And
Yeah,
I'm like, how do you get them here? They're like, well, they go to Europe first and then they come here. And that's when I'm like, wow, have this bourbon American, one-time use barrels infiltrated this industry. And that's when it got me thinking is, what did they do before? How did they make it before? Because the American bourbon barrels only probably about 80 years old. I mean,
yeah.
post-prohibition stuff.
So it was ale, wasn't it? Ale and sherries and ports. These were all the things that were transported back in the day, weren't they?
So,
Even to the Caribbean, and so they decant the port and then refill it with rum, and then send it back. They'd come back sea rolled into the UK, going to whoever's estate it was going to because they owned the plantation at the time. Whatever it may be. I mean, the history is just insane. The amount of history that's there. But yeah, I think that's how it started. It was kind of, it's almost like the ballast that they use for the ships. That's on the floor of St Nicholas Abbey now. Bricks
oh
from
wow.
Scotland and England and all over and stuff like that. I mean, that's amazing. But again, it's that whole sort of Caribbean idea of reusing everything that you get, one way or another. Making the economy work for it. And yeah, that I think it's secondary. That's how it happened basically, and that's how rum became matured, and that's how people understood the taste to get better through that maturation process.
So it was like an accident, this aging process.
Yeah,
Is that what we're
I
learning?
think so. I mean, I'm going to have to go back and research that, but I think it is something like that.
Yeah.
And it was only when they got it back to, wherever they were going, like England or wherever, or Scotland, and they tasted it and they're like, oh, wow, this is quite different to when we picked it up from the island.
It's so, all this is so interesting because here in the U.S., the most we have on, rum, I think is Hemingway drinking in Cuba. I mean, that's the whole history. And you guys got stories with the ships, the military, uh, all of this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
It's
and now
incredible.
in the UK as well, they've got a lot of people producing too. So there's a fairly decent sort of craft movement. As in the US, the massive craft movements in the US with even just with bourbon and rum, various different American whiskies and stuff like that. And I think that that's been adopted a lot by the UK as well. In terms of producing loads of different spirits, and having multi spirits companies, and there's a lot of rum producers in the UK as well now. So everybody, kind of any small craft people, they can buy some molasses, water it down, and throw some yeast in and produce some rum. And learn how to do it, which is it's dead funny because like throughout my career, I've worked with lots of aged products, developing aged products or raw products that you develop into aged SKUs and aged barrels and aged rums. But then now, like starting at Distinct, like just over a year ago now, it's like I've gone backwards to the beginning. So it's like working with molasses and then fermentation, temperatures and then yeasts and then developing these products with the distiller, waiting for them to come out and then reducing them down to go into cask at 70, and then doing blend formulations for, strictly for maturation purposes, so mixing heavier distillates with, medium or lighter distillates to get to arrive at certain profiles, that or that I think are going to work for a maturation process of 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. So it's those types of things now that I kind of work with, which is, I mean, I still do a lot of cask sales and bulk sales and stuff like that, and we do recipe development, all of that kind of stuff. Bottling, we've just got a new bottling line as well. So that was, I was on the Kappa last week, just wanting to know how it worked. So I was like pushing the buttons to screw caps on. And just for one of our clients, done some filming for it and stuff like that as well. But yeah, it's that whole kind of end-to-end process now. So
I mean,
that's what's really quite interesting. And like when I started at Distinct, I was telling Hannah and Will, who own the companies, I was telling them about this cask that I'd made at Main Rum Company. So one of the last things that I'd done at Main Rum Company was well, I don't know if you've seen Holmes Key, but they done like an infinity cask, and essentially,
oh
like
wow.
they call it an infinity cask. It kind of is, kind of isn't. I don't know. I'll let you decide, or I'll let your viewers decide. But essentially, what it was, we had every time we sold a cask, we would actually keep a retained sample, so 500 mils. Any sort of quality issues or anything like that, we could go back, revisit the sample, send it off for analysis or anything like that. And this was like 10 years. We were just taking these retained samples, then we'd leave them in the office for 12 months, and then put them all together in a box, put them on a pallet, and then send them to the warehouse. And they'd be stored in the warehouse. And so we just ended up with 6 or 7 pallets of retain archive samples basically, and some of the stuff was going back to like 2005 or something like that, predated me even being there. And so one of the things that I had to do was to decant all of these bottles back into cask. So I had a pre-thought, that when I was making these casks, I was thinking, oh, well, actually, I could probably come back and buy this at some point. So I was decanting all of these bottles, It was bottles. I think they were from 2020 and 2021, which was probably some of the best sales years that I had, and some of the best drums got sold those years. And so I was just taking notes. I had to mark down every single bottle, every single quantity, and then decanted them into this cask, which are very affectionately named IDH Legacy. So it's just my initials and Legacy, as because I thought, it's like a legacy cask. So yeah, you're probably looking at maybe 25 different countries, maybe something like that, maybe 30 different
Oh,
distilleries.
wow.
I could
That's
be.
that's big.
It could be maybe like
That's
40
fun.
different marks of rum as well. There's quite a lot of different stuff in there, and it was literally like hundreds and hundreds of bottles.
This is something I want to taste.
Yeah,
This is
I think everyone wants a taste. So you can go,
this
you
is
can go and sign up to the newsletter because I'm blogging about it every week now. So well, there's so many different elements to it.
but share the link so everyone gets to it. Spell it out so everyone can find your newsletter. Where
Yeah,
to find
sure.
you?
Yeah, I can put it on there. It's on our contacts page at distinctdistillers.co.uk. But
Got it.
like every
Okay.
week, it's on my LinkedIn too. So it's just Ian Hoyles on LinkedIn, and you can find it. And I've been documenting it for maybe the last 6 to 8 weeks now. But it's every sort of element that has gone into this cask, which is every distillery, every mark, all of the maturation histories behind them as well. So if there was, say, a rum from, I don't know, Barbados Foursquare or something like that, or Mount Gay, then you'd have the distillation year, you'd have the maturation period, what it was matured in, how long for, when it went into this cask, and the distillation type, column and pot, spoiler alert. But yeah, so all of these different aspects, different distilleries, bit of funky artwork to go with it, and then I do a really short blog for LinkedIn, and then if you sign up, you can read the whole blog where I've done a bit more of a piece on each of the distilleries with a bit more of the history, a bit more of the culture, and then a bit more of the spotlight on the individual components that have made up this particular cask.
I absolutely love this. Now, what did the taxman have to say with you emptying bottles into barrels?
HMRC. So everything was documented. So you record what you took, you record what you put back, and then you've got what's left in the cask basically. And it's been maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years now, 2.5 years that it's just been sat in cask homogenizing together now, all of these different elements. And we're going to do a very short release in June. So it's quite exciting. It could be, and like I say, it's an end-to-end thing now. So where I was helping lots of independent bottlers select different casks or provide different sort of types of rums, and then talk people through them, and go through tasting sessions together, try to understand what our clients really like, what is their sort of wheelhouse of flavour, if you like, so that we can select the right casks for them, and not make things too protracted. Yeah, it's like now it's almost a little bit like it's my turn now, where because Hannah and Will decided after tasting it that they really wanted to buy it, because they loved the quality of it. So now we're going to do a limited release of a couple of hundred bottles or so. Yeah, and it's just like understanding the independent bottlers even more now, because now I have to do the sort of pre-sales, and trying to do the artwork for it as well, plan the cogs for the bottling, distribution, all of that kind of stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Ah,
And I've even
yeah.
roped my mum into doing the illustrations for the label as well.
That's a challenge. Is she gonna be able to follow the legal requirements?
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll do all the legal stuff. She just have to do all the arty stuff. So it's taken an element from each island, whether it's a
Oh
bird,
my.
a tree, or sugarcane type, or an insect, or whatever, and then putting that into a sort of like a homogenized kind of drawing, that will hopefully be a label in the end.
I mean, this is beyond cool. I love it.
Anyone that knows me knows that I'm quite a geek anyway when it comes to rum, but like this is proper geeking out stuff, unfortunately.
This is really what I love. Explain what an independent bottler is. In the U.S., we don't really get this option because everything is so regulated. So it's something we need to bring here.
Yeah, I know I supply independent bottlers in the US too, and there's lots of them. But independent bottlers essentially they buy casks of rum from brokers or they'll buy it from distilleries direct, and they'll do a single cask with a limited amount of bottles, that is basically essentially a snapshot of one rum at one period in time, that for that particular cask won't be repeated again. There might be others like it, but there'll be none that are the same. So, yeah, independent bottlers, they have their own brand, they'll have their own style, they'll have their own palate, so they bottle things mainly that they like, and things that they think are important. And then they have their own kind of visual aspects as to how their brand looks. And they essentially form a following within the industry or within spirit lovers, and people buy into their visions.
So, like we're speaking about independent bottlers, one of the best parts about independent bottlers is you're guaranteed one happy client, and that's yourself. After all, you go, tell me if my understanding is wrong, you meet up, you might taste a couple barrels to get a feel of what's available. You purchase one barrel. On average, how many bottles do you get out of a barrel?
Probably anywhere between 250 and 350 bottles, depending on the size of your cask, of course, but average 200 litre, bit of evaporation, probably about 300 bottles.
And can you explain to the people the process that may be watching? Because, hey, maybe we might send you a client or two over here.
Oh, hey, man, send them all over. I've got end-to-end stuff, man. You can do the labeling, you can do the bottling, you can select the cask, you can source the cask. But yeah, so essentially, you basically have your brand idea, or you have an idea for a brand, and then you need to visualize it. How do you want it to look? What's your brand name? What's your story? What's your ethos behind the brand? And then understand those types of things. And then it's essentially just choosing your liquid that you want to bottle, choosing your bottle that you want it to go into, your labels, your illustrations, and then yeah, you just get it all filled together, and then that's it. You get it shipped up, packed up, and ready to ship, and it's good to go.
So just understanding the process. What happens once it's packed up? They bring it to their distributor, their retailer, or they pick
Yeah.
it up in the back of the car.
Well, if they want to pay the duty up front, they can do that. That's not a problem. As long as you pay the duty, it doesn't matter. If it goes for export to the US, then there's no duty to pay. You have to pay import taxes instead, unfortunately, which I think is probably, I think Trump's on 10% at the moment, or 15% for every year. I mean, who knows? I mean, it might change tomorrow. And so, we don't
Well,
know.
we're speaking. He's like, I don't like what Eon and Tarabella are saying. 28%, but only rum. So, the unpredictability of it. How's that affected you once we're on it?
Well, I mean, it doesn't affect me as much. I mean, it does affect our clients though. Particularly clients in the US. So it does make it more difficult for them, and so we're always trying to sort of make sure that pricing stays competitive for these types of things that happen. I mean, obviously, it's just a good market to buy at the moment. But yeah, I mean, there's so many good IBs out in the US as well, doing great things for rum. And there's lots of great product to be able to bottle immediately. There's lots of great stuff now that's good to bottle at good prices. So there's no reason why somebody wouldn't do it. There's really great opportunity at the moment, and with the export, you can get it all cased up and sent out and just fill out the paperwork and do the imports, and then door-to-door deliveries to a licensed representative. Sorry. So, and as long as you've got a clearance agent in the US that you can work with, I've worked with quite a few. I've got a couple of distributors that I know really well that are really, really good at their job too. They're IBs in the US that do their own thing too. Raising glasses, they're really good at everything that they do. So these are types of guys you can partner with, and you can do end to end stuff with quite easily.
What I love about the independent battlers is when you get one of their battles, it's really good or downright horrible. There's no, it's one individual, he chose it. So either he's really good at choosing, or he so doesn't match what you bought, but it's always an experience. You go into the shop and they have an independent battler, you know you're getting a good ride. Can I say it like that?
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, everyone's got their own palate though, and so,
Correct.
and this is the thing about rum. This is the great power of rum, and probably the great weakness of rum is the diversity in which we find it. The difference in raw materials that you can start with, the difference in distillation process, and then further on into your maturation process can just be so different. There's so many different variables, so many different ways to go, so many different types of rums that you can buy. I mean, it's literally just so expansive, and I think that's probably why I love it so much. But I think maybe end users, people who are buying bottles, who are not particularly into rum or open to the idea of rum, might find it quite difficult, to understand it. And so, it's a lot of it is education at the moment, and there's lots of great people doing lots of great educational pieces out there, as well as independent bottlers are great for that too, because they really kind of educate their own sphere of people to understand what it is, and how the product has actually come about, how it was matured, where it's matured, the distillation process, the cask types that we used. So yeah, I mean it's just building on what's already there, I think.
I think another element to the rum industry which is unique is the wide variety of characters in the industry.
Yeah.
Scotch is always gonna be a Scotch, and it's always gonna be, you don't get, the flavor profile is gonna be a Scotch. I mean, it's very hard to say this one is a little more peated, this one's more the barley. But with rum, I mean, there's character in every there's characters in the industry down in the Caribbean, in Venezuela is going to be very different than the one coming from somewhere in South Africa. It's all over the place. It's not one area and one country. And if even the U.S. bourbon, a bourbon has a standard profile. Am I wrong?
Yeah, but it's tightly regulated as well, though.
Yeah. So okay, this is 96 on the scale, but with rum, at least what I find is, and this is so well with independent battlers, that they're all over the place. They're always unique and delicious, or absolutely, in my taste buds, atrocious. Someone else might love it, and that's why he chose it.
Yeah.
But it's all over. I go onto Reddit and I'll see a conversation about Battle 46 or whatever of different bourbons, and the note is a little off. With rum, you don't get that. You're gonna get one. This one tastes like, this one tastes like massive and unique, different profiles. I mean, that's just why I love rum so much. That's what stands out to me in this space.
Yeah, because I mean, even when you look between sort of molasses, cane syrup, and cane juice, I mean, they are just very different. Like I always like to think cane syrup is sort of the in between of molasses and sort of cane juice. But if you go like to the extremes of molasses and cane juice, I mean, the profile is just so radically different in comparison, that one person might try that and they've been told it's a rum, and then they drink the cane juice and like, what the hell is this? It's it's
Exactly.
grassy, it's floral, it's sweet. What is happening? This
What
isn't like
went wrong?
I had before, which is a lot more of those kind of maybe treacly kind of notes, or coffee and chocolate, because of it's molasses rather than cane juice. But that's part of the fun of it, and it really is, a lot of it is just education.
Yes, I fully agree. So, Ian, let's close out over here. We're almost at the hour mark. Fill us everything that people need to know about your distillery, how to reach you, and how to become independent bottlers. Because if you do that, people really want to do it. It's something. It's an experience. You'll take your children, your neighbors, your friends. It's a real wholesome, enjoyable journey to take. And the cool part about it is it doesn't include a computer screen.
That is true, and you know it can be all done to whatever kind of specification you're looking for. You know, you get to choose. You can source your own rum. You can choose the cask that you want it to go in. You can choose your maturation time. Hell, you know, You will distill something for you that's made to your profile. We'll import the molasses from whatever country you want and do a single cask creation. You know, that's the kind of stuff that we're looking to do for people. You know, we build portfolios for people. So if you want one, two, or three, or you want to have a consortium of people together to own your own casks and then bottle in the future, that's all the kind of stuff that we can do. We can advise you on that. We can build out maturation programs for whatever you need. But yeah, it can start from just one cask. Literally, just buy one cask. We can bottle one cask. You can export it. Yeah, we can do all of that for you. It's really, really easy. Distinct Distillers,
It's distinct.
it is very, very easy to remember.
Yeah.
And you can contact me anytime, Ian at distinctdistillers.co.uk. Very, very easy email. I'm easy to reach on LinkedIn too.
Oh,
But yeah, if anyone does have any sort of interesting ideas or projects that they want to start or anything like that, that is my wheelhouse of stuff. So, and that's the kind of stuff I love doing. I love working with clients to be able to get a creation into a bottle and then for them to put it out into the market. It's all about getting good rum into the market for good people to drink, and yeah, just making more noise about rum and how much quality and culture and diversity is there for everybody to see.
thank you, Ian. I just want to put in one more piece over here. Don't take the whole cask for yourself. What I've found works fantastic is two or three friends. It's not prohibitively expensive then. And
No.
you have like a group of three, four guys discussing this. You're away from the computer screen. Should we age it for 3 years, 1 year, 2 year? Which it's a project, it's a passion, and from three, four people, it's not all your stress. Each one of you wind up bringing in 10, 15 friends, which again is not a lot. And before you know it, there's not enough bottles left for all of you, and you're on to the next cask. So
Yeah.
it's something you got to do. It's a life experience. It's not such a big leap. You might think it is, but I'm telling you, and rum is the spirit to start off with. It's sweet. It's easy to drink. It's something you drink with friends. So let's do it.